Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I have to say I'd like to also thank Professor Remus and Mirella for organising this event. It gives us an opportunity to hopefully inform you a little bit about what the European Court of Auditors does, because I'm sure many of you have no idea who we are, what we do, and we hope that the next few minutes will at least make you better informed about that. I have bad news for the rector in the first instance, because you actually are paying all of us. I mean, you're an EU taxpayer, and your EU taxpayer funds the budget, which actually pays us all. So indirectly, you're actually paying us. So I'd like to thank you from the start, first of all. Thank you for that. So, as I say, we are an EU institution. Unfortunately, we're probably not as well known as we would like to be. I mean, in terms of we don't want to be known just for the sake of being known. We want to be known because basically people then are aware of the work that we do, because we think that the work that we do is very important in terms of informing EU taxpayers. And you're all EU taxpayers here, either are or will be at some stage in the future. So I think what I would like to do is just very quickly go through, what we are, as I said, what we do. And then I think one of the big things for us is, we're all elder statesmen here, myself, Pierre, and even Lucian. He likes to think he's very young, but we're not as young as we think we are now, Lucian. And what we need in the EU institutions is new blood. We need people to keep the project going, because we see this antipathy towards the EU and maybe people turning away from it. And we really need people that, the people in the European Commission and the European Parliament are shaping basically how we live every day. The decisions that they take ultimately filter down, and it's very important then that young people are involved. And as I say, this is not just, I'm Irish, we're a very small country, but we're losing a lot of people from the institutions, and I keep telling the Irish government, and I would say the same to every member state government, getting people into the EU institutions is an investment in the future. And that's what needs to happen, because I think it's very important that all the member states are represented. They all bring something of their own to the table. So I think it's very important. So now to go back to who we are, as I said, as I said already, we're an EU institution. There's only 7 EU institutions, in fact, so it's quite a privilege that we're members of this EU institution. The EU institutions are spread around 3 main more or less, Brussels, the famous Brussels bubble. Everyone talks about Brussels when they talk about the EU. But there are a number of bodies in Luxembourg where we're based, and that's another thing. Maybe people don't know where Luxembourg is either, as well as the court. And then we obviously have Strasbourg in France, and then the European Central Bank is in Germany, in Frankfurt. So I think we all have different roles in the architecture. This is basically the architecture of the EU institutions, and we all have very different roles. As you can see, the political direction comes from the European Council. So this is the ministers or the prime ministers who set the agenda, the political agenda. And then basically you have also, you have another fora of the council is the Council of Ministers, which meets regularly to discuss particular topics. If it's agriculture, it's all the agriculture ministers. If it's, cohesion, it's all those involved in cohesion. So that's the different fora. Then we have the 2 legislative bodies. The European Commission is the most, for us at least, is very important. It's our main auditee. They're the people who actually spend the EU budget. So the European Commission is the one who makes legislative proposals, and Pierre was a commissioner, so he knows very well how it all works. And there is a sort of a joint procedure with the European Parliament whereby they also have a role which has increased over the years in terms of the legislation which is on the table. Then we have the judiciary, which is the European Court of Justice. We've all heard of different cases being brought to the Court of Justice, which is based in Luxembourg, whether it's infringement procedures or anti-competition or whatever it might be. We had a very big recent case in Ireland with the Apple hearing, so many people have heard of that one. As I say, then we have the European Central Bank, which looks at monetary policy and banking supervision. And then we have us, and I would say last but not least. I think we're an important cog in the wheel. I think why we would like to raise our profile, I think it's not, as I said, we're auditors first and foremost. The real people in the headlines are the politicians. They're the ones who are basically, making the legislative proposals and implementing them. But as I say, we have a role. And our role is basically, I would say, it's laid out here. But what we're trying to do in a way is to contribute to the better use of the EU taxpayers' money. I've already said this several times, the EU taxpayer is what funds the EU budget. It's roughly €500 for every EU citizen. That's what goes into the EU budget every year. So all of you are donating €500 to the budget. So I think we all need to see what's happening with that money. So we basically, we're trying to improve the financial management of the budget. We're also trying to give advice to the Commission and the Parliament as to how things can improve going forward, whether it's in terms of governance, whether it's in terms of policy implementation. And these are the kind of main functions that we have. So international cooperation is on display here today, I would say. We basically have different fora where we interact with, because we are one audit community across the world. I mean, whether we're auditing in Moldova or Romania or wherever, we all have the same objective basically as independent external auditors. We're all, as I say, auditing the implementation of budgetary expenditure and trying to see how it can be done better. So we work together in different fora. I mean, we have a contact committee, which is basically all they're called, very modestly, I would say, Supreme Audit Institutes. That's the audit, the Court of Accounts in Romania or wherever. It's different names. I mean, the French Court des Comptes, the Controlling Auditor General in Ireland, but they're all basically called the Supreme Audit Institute in the member state. And we chair that. They meet at the level of the presidents. We meet once a year. And basically, there are a lot of working groups which share experience, because what we're saying is we're all dealing with the same topics and we're trying to basically learn from each other. Then we have more international, outside the EU, there's INTESOI, which is basically the same bodies, but from all over the world. Obviously there are some specificities in different areas which are not common to us. But for instance, we're the chair of the Professional Standards Committee, and auditing standards are applicable to all auditors wherever they are. So I think it's a very important role. So as I say, I think we don't want to be sort of in our ivory tower. We basically interact because things are happening and the environment we work in is changing all the time. As you know, the seismic shifts in geopolitics and environment and everything else, energy is all having an impact ultimately on the work that we do down the road. So this is the organisation of the European Court of Auditors. In a way, we mirror the European Commission, which most people will know probably more about. I mean, we basically have a member which is nominated by each member state. So we have 27 members. Lucian, there is the Romanian member. He's in Chamber 4. Pierre is in Chamber 5. So basically what we've done is these chambers are basically following particular policy areas so that we can do an amount of work in all the policy areas every year. So for instance, Chamber 1 is basically natural resources. So there we're looking at things like climate change, energy, agriculture. Chamber 2 is cohesion, which is very important for Romania. For instance, I mean, I think you get about 2 billion every year from the EU for cohesion, 2.9 billion for agriculture. Then you have Chamber 3, which is basically the external world, if you like. And up until now, this was a very small chamber. It was dealing with sort of, EU support to third countries in Africa, but over the last few years it has really developed. We're looking at things like migration there, cybersecurity, defence obviously now is another thing. The Ukraine obviously is a big issue for us in that chamber. So it's a chamber which its role is sort of expanding. Chamber 4, where Lucian is basically the one where we look at the common market, if you like, at competition. We also have a lot of research and development that's covered in there, Horizon. So it's a bit of a mixed bag. And then Chamber 5 looks at horizontal issues across the budget. So what we're trying to do every year is cover a number of topics which we hope are relevant for both our stakeholders, which, as I said, is the Commission and the Parliament mainly, but also some of them are very technical and wouldn't be of interest to sort of the general public, let's say, but some of them actually are. And we might come across some of them which I think are very interesting for the man on the bus, as they always say. I mean, the normal citizen. So as well as that, we obviously have on the administrative side, we have a Secretary General who looks after things like IT. We have a big translation support because we have to publish everything and we have to communicate with all the member states in the official languages. So we have a big translation overhead, I would say, at the moment. So he's in charge of that. We have an ethics committee, which I think is extremely important in this day and age. We're all public servants. We have to be seen, to practice what we preach, basically, and be seen to be holier than thou, if you like. Under my remit then, basically, we have horizontal issues. I have the legal service and internal audit, but I think more importantly are things like our strategy, our annual work programme. So horizontal issues that basically then translate into the work that we actually carried out. And another very important thing we have is the Audit Quality Control Committee. Because we have these chambers and they're all doing their work in their own, sort of, I wouldn't say silos, but individual chambers, we have to make sure that there's someone there who's making sure that we're coherent and consistent and that, you know, the messaging is coherent, and also that we can stand over what we say. Because, I mean, I think it's very important, I think, and my colleagues from the national SIs will agree, we have to be credible as independent audit institutions, and we can only do that if we're producing reports which are solid and they're evidence-based, and it's not just something we would like to say. So I think, you know, it's very important that we have these robust sort of controls in place. So as I say, our work, we have a strategy, I mean, again, which was published last November. I mean, our mantra this time has been that we want to reinforce trust through audit. So again, coming back to the thing about trust of the citizens, because again, I think this is vital, not just for the Court of Auditors, but for the EU project as a whole, that EU citizens have trust in the project, let's say. And I think we're a key component in that. So basically our mission is to be independent and to produce high quality audits, and also to enhance, you know, basically how objectives are being achieved, and hopefully improve things going forward. I think it's very important that we're not politicians, we're not decision makers, that's their role, and that's why we have the 7 different institutions. But what we're trying to do is when decisions are made, we're not questioning them, we're coming along seeing how they are implemented and say, okay, is there better ways of doing this, or is this the best way of doing it? And we make suggestions on that basis and recommendations. So we have, I would say, 2 pillars of work. We have our financial audits, so we have which we call recurrent audits here. So that's our annual report. And every year here, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, we've looked at the EU budget. So has it been spent in accordance with the rules? So this is more compliance audit. Are the projects actually complying with the rules? The second part is our performance audit, special reports we call them. And again, it's about 50% of our resources. And here we're more looking at, the first part is sort of the foundation to say, okay, are the rules being enforced? The second one is to see, okay, now are the policies actually achieving the objectives that they were set out to do? Is it actually making any difference on the ground to EU citizens? I mean, if we said we will promise to deliver a youth guarantee or a child guarantee or whatever it might be, is that actually being delivered in practice across the member states? So, as I say, our annual report, we gave a clean opinion on accounts and revenue, and on budget spending, we said we give an adverse opinion, which is not a great situation for the Commission, but it is what it is. We gave an adverse opinion because basically when we do these transactions, we have found that, if you want to call it non-compliance with rules or non-eligible projects or whatever it might be, but I would like to reiterate here, it's not fraud, is that we found 3.6% of an error rate across the budget. And I always have to say to people, I mean, the fact that a project has an error doesn't mean that it wasn't a good project and it actually gave added value to our citizens, and vice versa. Some projects which are perfect on paper actually are useless at the end of the day. So let's try and get the balance right, I would say. So as you can see, EU spending was roughly around 200 billion per year. We also have the Recovery and Resilience Facility under the Next Generation EU. The payments for 2024 were about just over 50 billion euros. That depends on the claims coming through from the different member states as they implement their recovery plans. One issue which we have raised a number of times is basically the level of EU debt. I mean, debt, we all hear about debt at the level of member states itself. I mean, many member states, because after the pandemic, the rules were relaxed, and many are very much in debt. So this makes it more difficult in terms of raising money from member states. But we see that, you know, the EU debt was 600 billion euros at the end of 24, and we estimate it will be roughly 900 billion by the end of 2027. And as you can see there, also we have, at the end of 24, support to the Ukraine was almost 50 billion euros. So if you look at our annual report, as I say, we had we have an error rate of 3.6%. It was better than the previous year where it was 5.2, so it was a better result, if you like. But it's only a statistical sample. It can change from year to year depending on the sample and the level of risk of the different transactions. But I think one area where we have raised is about debt. I mentioned that already. And here we have seen that you have to, in terms of being ready to pay back your debt, you have to have an income stream. And the Commission didn't actually have one to pay back the NGU debt. And now for the next budget, which is for 2028-34, we already see that they have to put aside 30 billion euro every year to pay that debt. So already we're starting from a minus 30 billion position, if you want to put it like that. So I'd say these are kind of the main issues in the different report, in the annual report. I mean, high inflation obviously has an impact on the purchasing power of the budget. So I'd say this is our compliance report. Have the rules been followed? What politicians sometimes are more interested in are these special reports. I mean, because here what we're saying is these are the areas that we're looking at. So for instance, security and defence. As I already said, more important as we go along. And you can see now the level of tasks is quite high there. We've 8 tasks there. And you can see, I mean, we just issued one on the nuclear, facilities in Europe, let's say. We also did one on military mobility there as well. Climate and change in the environment. There, I mean, we have done quite a lot of work. I think it will come down a little bit now. I mean, and will be replaced probably by the competitiveness area, because that's the new area. And as you can see, I think one of our reports, which was very interesting, it's under the climate change thing, but it's actually about competitiveness as well. It's about critical raw materials. And there, it's a bit like the dependence we had on the Russian for oil. We basically have a huge dependence on countries from China to all over the world for critical raw materials, which will have an impact on our strategic autonomy. I mean, without this, the energy transition will be difficult to achieve, because we need things like lithium or whatever for batteries. So these are things we need to source. And if you read our report, it's quite interesting. It's saying it's very difficult, I mean, to just get these all of a sudden. It will take time. Some of it can be recycled, but the recycling levels in the EU are very low for these materials. So then we have other headings there: economic competitiveness, other, which is a miscellaneous thing there. You can see, basically cancer, trying to use efforts to beat cancer. So what I would say is, I mean, sometimes people think that, the European Court of Auditors, all they do is accounts. But what I'm trying to show here is that we really do a varied range of topics. And as I say, critical raw materials, I think, is very important for everyone. It's not too technical a report. Military mobility was another one, which was very interesting, because it showed, how ready or not ready we were when the war broke out in Ukraine, and basically the need for maybe better coordination across the member states to make sure that there's a coherent approach to issues like that. So as I say, here's a couple of the reports that we have done. I mean, the first one I've already mentioned is the military mobility. The third one is forest fires. I have to come over because I can't see it, it's very small. And then, critical raw materials I've already mentioned. So as I say, these are just reports we've published. Everything we publish is on our internet site. We're very transparent about that. Everything is published. Everything is published in the official languages, so it's easy for everyone to access and read. So one of the things that has kept us quite busy in the last few weeks is the next budget. So the next EU budget is for 2028-2034. And as I said, we're entering into a different environment. We know there are different and new priorities. And this is basically what's on the table at the moment. I mean, the EU, or the Commission, let's say, has proposed a budget of around 2 trillion euros. And within that, there's a new fund, 865 billion euros, which is basically lumping everything together in terms of cohesion and agriculture, whereas before they were separated out. Now they will be all in one fund. The member states will have to come up with a national plan, and they will be paid on the basis of that. There's also, for the first time, we talked about borrowing earlier, the opportunity to borrow all EU projects are co-financed generally. So the member state pays something and the EU pays something. So what they're actually offering is that member states will be able to borrow to pay their part of it and pay it back later. Again, in line with the budgetary constraints or treasury constraints in different member states. Then we have the new competitiveness fund. Again, a huge figure in there, of which 130 billion is for defence. Again, that's a new area for us. We haven't audited that much in the past, because basically defence didn't feature in the EU budget per se. So we have given our opinions on these. I mean, basically what we're saying is that, you know, we need some simplification, we need flexibility, we need all these things, but we need to make sure that they're done in a balanced way, so that still we can, as auditors, come along afterwards and be able to verify that the money has been spent in line with aligning with the objectives of the EU. One other big area I would say for concern is how it's going to be financed. I mean, this 2 trillion euros, there's already soundings from many member states that it's too high, the 2 trillion euros. They don't want to pay any more national contribution, because normally what you do is you pay a percentage of the GNI, so they don't want to pay any more. I mean, because again of the budgetary constraints. So the Commission has come up with 4 or 5 new sources of revenue. One is a tobacco tax, one is an e-waste management. There's a core tax which is on the profits of companies with a turnover of over 100,000. So these are new sources of income, but the problem is we're not sure that they will actually materialise, because all the member states have to agree to that. And for instance, there's already a tobacco tax in Ireland which is being collected for the national coffers. So if this tax comes in, they will have to give it to Brussels. So that's just one example, but there are many member states who have issues with different elements of this. And this is exactly what I said happened with the NGEU, the Next Generation EU. There was the own resources which were on the table were vetoed by 2 or 3 member states, and they never saw the light of day. And the problem this time is that the own resources is roughly 65 billion euros per year. So out of the 2 trillion, 65 billion will come from own resources every year. 44 billion every year is from these new resources. So obviously, if the 44 billion doesn't materialise, there's a huge hole in the budget. So then you have questions to answer. What do? Do you basically reprioritise your priorities? Do you drop some of them? Because obviously there are many new priorities on the table, whether it's enlargement, which is obviously of a big, significant interest to Moldova. You know, we have security, we have defence. So all these in their own right warrant, you know, being addressed, but someone has to pay at the end of the day, and this is the problem: who will actually, where the money will come from to pay for these. So just to finish, I mean, I started by saying I think it's very important that people are aware of opportunities in the EU institutions. I have to say, generally speaking, when we look at the applications from different member states, it's normally Italians and Romanians who are not far behind as well. So it's quite well, they seem to be quite well aware of it, but I would just encourage that to keep up and keep applying for these things. And what we do is we offer a traineeship twice a year. It's for 6 months. Basically, it's in all the different services. It can be in audit, it can be in communication, it can be in translation, it can be anywhere. So it's 17 euros per month plus the travel expenses to come. I have to be honest and say it's quite expensive to find accommodation in Luxembourg. So the 1700 is needed, believe me. So and then just the application for the next batch opens on the 1st of April. So again, I would encourage anyone who's interested in thinking about a career. I think a traineeship or internship, whatever you want to call it, is a very good way of just putting your toe in the water to see, you know, would this be something that I might be interested in the long term? As I say, that's our traineeship programme. We're a small institution. We're roughly 950 people. So if we compare to some of the other big institutions, you have the European Commission, which has its own Blue Book traineeship. I mean, the European Commission is almost 30,000 people. So all of these institutions have a traineeship programme. All the agencies across Europe, there's 43 of them, they all take on trainees as well. So what I'm trying to say is that there are an awful lot of traineeship opportunities in either institutions or in different agencies and bodies linked to the EU activity. So that's basically it, and thank you very much for your attention. I hope it wasn't too long.